Good afternoon, Mr. Meeks. How does one go about becoming a U.S. representative?
Okay, so first off, let me clarify, there's a difference between a U.S. representative and a state representative. So I'm a state level representative, so I represent the citizens in Little Rock versus a U.S. who does it in Congress. So as far as how one goes about doing it, very basic. You just have to file for office. That usually occurs in March or November, depending on where we're at in the election cycle. You file for office with your political party, and then it's just a matter of going out and getting the majority of the citizens to vote for you. As far as the requirements for running for office, the state of Arkansas, you just have to be 21 years old and live in the district for at least a year. But other than that, there's no education requirements or job requirements.
Okay. What would your advice be to students if they were interested in seeking a career in politics?
Okay, so very good question. So whenever you're talking about a career in politics, you're talking about working with people. So the first bit of advice is to make sure that you enjoy working with folks, and that you're willing to listen to what they have to say, that you're willing to take the good and the bad, because one of the challenges of being into politics is regardless of what you do, there's always going to be folks that are going to be upset at you. And so you have to be willing to take that as well as obviously there's going to be people who agree with you. And so you've got to be willing to work with both sides and to accept the consequences of decisions that you make. So.
What course in high school or college would be beneficial if they were seeking like a career in politics?
Sure. I think if you're going to seek a career in politics, probably one of the most important things that you can study is history, especially U.S. history, civics, and economics. One of the challenges that we have in our society today is a lot of folks don't know and understand how government actually works. I think some statistics say that 2/3 of American adults don't understand the three branches of government and how they relate to each other. And so if you're going to serve in the political arena, it's very important that you understand what government is and how it works and how it's supposed to function, and of course understand what's in the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, because when you take an oath of office, that's what you're taking an oath to, is to the Constitution. And if you're going to take an oath to the document, obviously we should know what's in it.
Yeah. What's the training or education required for your career or job?
So to actually run for office, there is no educational requirements. Any citizen that is eligible can file to run for office. Obviously, there's a lot more to it than that. You've got to be good working with people. You've got to understand the folks in your district. I work with on a regular basis. I work with the superintendents at all the schools in the area. I work with the mayors from time to time. I work with the police and the fire. So it's important to know all the community leaders, the business leaders. Not all, but you've got to have a good working relationship with a lot of them. And then also you have to develop working relationships with your colleagues. So for example, I'm in the House, there's 100 members, and so I've got to have good working relationships with them. But in politics, it's more than, in government, it's more than just the elected official. So for example, in the House of Representatives, we have a team of lawyers who do the research and craft the legislation that we propose that eventually becomes bills. So there's a team of lawyers that does that. We have teams of financial experts that are looking at the budgets of all of the various state agencies, the counties, school, and bringing that stuff to us. So we've got lawyers, we've got economists, we also have auditors, and the job of the auditors is to go out and conduct audits of all the state agencies and these entities and bring that information to us. We also have just general, secretarial, we have analysts. So being involved in government is far more than just the elected officials that you'll see on TV.
Yeah. Describe a typical day for like what you do.
Sure. So a typical day varies depending on where we're at in the calendar year, and that's one of the things I really enjoy about getting to do what I do. When we're in session, that's about a 4-month period from January to April. That's the time when we make laws. When we're in session, basically I get up in the morning, drive to Little Rock, we hold committee meetings, and during the committee meetings, so for example, I serve on the Education Committee, we will look at any bills that have been proposed that deal with education. Those will be debated and either passed or failed, depending on what the committee decides. Most days, there's time for lunch, some days there's not. At 1:30, the full House meets, so all the representatives come together, and that's when we finalize passages of the bills that have been presented to us. So the bill passes in the Education Committee. Usually 2 to 3 days later, we'll have it on the floor of the House, and the full House will vote it, and then either send it to the governor or send it down to the Senate, as the case may be. And those can go, sometimes they go to 3 o'clock in the afternoon, sometimes they go to 5 or 6 o'clock. Then at that point, come home for the evening and study the bills that I'm going to be addressing the next day. Right now, when we're not in session, we're in something called the interim, and during the interim, it's a little more flexibility. Schedule is, I don't want to say crazier, but it's not as regular. It's a very irregular schedule. That may be the best way to put it. So I'll spend anywhere from 7 to 14 days in Little Rock at committee meetings. At that time, we're doing oversight. Right now, today we just finished budget hearings, for example, so we look at budget. We're looking at audit reports, things like that during the interim. We also will travel to other states to attend conferences. So this past weekend I was in Dallas attending a pro-family conference, and at those conferences it gives us the opportunity to talk with lawmakers from other states, because a lot of the things we're dealing with here in Arkansas, they're dealing with them in other states, and by understanding how they're dealing with problems, we can learn from each other and network, and so there's a lot of that goes on. And so that's just the legislative side, plus there's the community side. So there are things that I will attend, community organizations where I'll go and speak at, things such like this for y'all. And you know, the Christmas parade's coming up, so I'll be in those Christmas parades. So there's a lot of community things that are done as well. So my schedule is constantly changing. Yesterday I met with a constituent, so you have those as well. So a lot of variety during the interim.
How long do you usually work in a day? I know you talked about it, like 5 to 6 and stuff like that.
Right.
When you're not in session.
Right. So as far as how long I work during the day when we're in session, it's basically from sunrise to, from getting up to going to bed. I'm working. During the interim, it varies. This week I was in Little Rock beginning at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I worked until on budgets until 4 or 5 o'clock. So it was basically an all-day deal. Today we met at 9 o'clock this morning. We were done by noon, and so this afternoon I can look at constituent concerns or interact with the community. And then there's days where it's quiet, where I don't have anything to do. Next week being the week of a holiday, it's a slow week, and so there'll be probably very little time commitment for the state representative side.
Is it like that for every holiday, or most of them? Or?
For most of them it is, yeah.
Okay.
Things have been, this year with the pandemic, things were, as you can imagine, turned on their head. Back during March, April, May, I worked with more constituents during that 3 months than I had the entire 8 years combined that I had done earlier. And that's so, and with constituent issues, you never know when they're gonna come up. Some months I might deal with 2 or 3, sometimes it might be 5 or 6, and of course they vary depending on what's going on.
Do you mind speaking about the salary range?
No, not at all. Some adults might, but technically I work for you, and so because of that, my salary is public domain, so anybody can go on the state website and look and see how much we make. Right now we make a little over $40,000 a year. The governor makes, I think, the governor and the constitutional officers, they make about 80, 88, 89, 90, somewhere around 90K a year is what they make.
Okay, do you get paid bi-weekly or monthly? Or?
Bi-weekly.
Bi-weekly, okay. What do you think is the best part about your job?
I think there's 2 things I really like about my job. The first one is I get to meet a lot of great people. And that is, people here in the community that otherwise would never have the opportunity to meet or work with. There's a lot of fascinating folks here and a lot of neat stories. I also have the opportunity to meet and work with a lot of people you see on television. So obviously I know the governor, I talk with him on a regular basis. All of our state, senators, representatives, I know them. Our congressmen, I know all of them. Our senators, I know all of them. And so it gives me the opportunity to know these folks as people rather than just somebody you see on TV. And so I have enjoyed that aspect of it. Also with the conferences and stuff, I've had the opportunity to travel and go to places that normally you would never have the opportunity to. So one time I had the chance to take a tour inside the Center for Disease Control over in Atlanta, Georgia. I've had the opportunity to go inside a nuclear power plant over in Washington State, so I actually got to look down and see where the fuel rods were and how those were replaced. Same thing here in Arkansas. I've had a chance to go to a lot of unique places that normally the general public doesn't get to go. So I've really enjoyed that aspect of it as well.
What attributes do you think someone needs to have to be really successful as a representative?
So to be successful in this, I think one of the main things you need to do is you need to be good with working with people, obviously, because politics it's all about people. I also think that you need to have somewhat of a servant's heart. There's two kinds of leaders. There's servant leaders, and then there's leaders who try to lord over you. And I think to be successful in this career, you have to be a servant leader. It's important to understand that ultimately your ability to serve in this position, the ultimate authority comes from the people you serve. So it's important to keep that in mind. And I would also say it's good to be a teacher or someone who's good at disseminating information, because it's important to let the people that you serve know what you're doing, why things are the way they are, because there's a lot of confusion, and especially during the pandemic, there was a lot of confusion. A lot of folks didn't know what was going on, and I made it a point to make regular posts on my Facebook page and on the community Facebook page about this is what's going on, this is what the experts are saying. So keeping the community informed about what's going on, I think, is a very good sign of someone who's doing what I'm doing.
Do the responsibilities of your positions change frequently, or?
Not a whole lot. The overall job description is pretty much the same as it's been ever since the state was constituted. Obviously, the issues that we work on change from time to time. What's important today may not be as important tomorrow. With the pandemic, obviously there were new things that came up that we had to deal with. So the things you have to deal with obviously change through times, but as far as the overarching responsibilities, they pretty much stay the same.
Yeah, okay. How long are the terms for you work for?
Okay, so state representatives have 2-year terms. So every 2 years we're on the ballot, and then under current Arkansas law, you can serve 16 years. That was recently changed during this last election. The people just approved a new term limits law, if you will, and what that's going to allow is, instead of serving 16 years and being done lifetime, you serve 12, and then you have to sit out 4, and then you could conceivably serve another 12. The idea there being is, someone in their 30s could maybe serve for 12 years, they get done, and when they come, maybe when they retire, they want to serve again, they would have that opportunity. Ultimately, of course, that decision is left up to the people they serve, whether they'll reelect them or not.
Do you have any advice for people curious going down the path of politics or anything like that?
Yeah, a couple of pieces of advice if you're interested in getting into politics or into government in general. A couple things I would recommend is, one, make sure to study American history and know the Constitutional Declaration, like I said before. Be familiar and get comfortable with networking with other folks, learn how to work with groups of people. And then the last thing I would say is, keep your life clean, because anything that you do or anything you post on Facebook, it's going to be out there, and people will use it against you. So, try to keep your nose clean. If anybody has any questions or would like to stay updated on what's going on with their state government, visit my Facebook page or my website at stephenmeeks.org, and I appreciate y'all having me today.